Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start with my pear painting, but as you can see, I'm putting all 3 squares of watercolor paper on one board so that I'm gonna have room, because I'm gonna paint some, and then while this is drying before I can move on to other parts, I can jump over and work on my flower a little bit, then back to my pear, back to my flower. Eventually we'll get to this glass of water. For now, you just need to make sure you can fit these 2 on, the pear and the flower, but later leave room that you'll be able to put the glass on here as well. So that's kind of how we want to arrange our artboard. But for now, I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm really just gonna focus on the pear itself. Now I'm gonna need 3 colors of paint for my pear. I've got my alizarin crimson, my hooker's green, and my yellow ochre. So that's what I've gone ahead and I've squeezed into little areas here on my palette, and then I'm gonna be able to go ahead and start painting. Now I'm gonna be using in my paint a wet on wet paint technique. So I'm gonna try to really zoom in so you guys can see this well. For the start, I'm also gonna be using a number of brushes. A number 10 can work, you can see that there, or I could even go down to like an 8 or even like a 6. So, you know, my 6, which is right here, you can see, that'll work for what I need to do. It's really just a matter of preference and what you like. That's up to you. So I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna get some nice clean water, and clean water is gonna be really important. And my goal with the clean water is I'm gonna go in and I'm going to fill my entire painting of the pear shape with an even coat of clean water. Now, sometimes I need to get a kind of a strange angle to my paper so I can catch and see the light glistening. I'm kind of leaning over now to make sure, because it's hard to know, am I actually painting where I think I'm painting? Because again, it's clear. And did I get all the areas or did I miss a spot? So I can go in and I'm gonna start painting on there. You can't really tell, but there should be a bit of a glare on some of this area. And I'm using just the tip of my brush. Sometimes I'm using the side a little bit, but I'm just trying to get in there and get a nice even coat of water. So it's an even level of moisture or dampness all along my pear. And I can go in, just get it. Again, you want to make sure it's not going to dry while you're painting, but at the same time, you don't want giant puddles where it's going to pool and drip. So it's kind of a balance. So now I can go in and I can start working. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to work on my highlight color. So I'm going to pull up just a little bit of this yellow ochre, mix that into sort of a medium, not watery, but not too dark level. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to put some highlight here in my pear up near the top, sort of like where it starts to taper. And I can always dab some in. And then I'm also gonna do a little bit kind of here near the top of the big round area. But that's kind of like gonna be, I want some over here, I want some here. And I can go all the way to the top. But now I've got kind of a decent highlight. So I've got that highlight and it's still wet, and you can see it's wet because it's starting to spread. There's not as defined an edge, it's kind of fading out a little bit. Now I gotta work kind of fast here. So I'm gonna go ahead and next, I'm gonna grab some of, just a little hint of the alizarin crimson. And I'm gonna go ahead, pick up just a little bit of that so it's not too deep. But I'm gonna go and sort of from the base of the stem, I'm just gonna start to put in a thin line of that alizarin crimson. And I'm just doing like almost a dashed line as I go. And it starts to pick up. Now in some areas, if it's too wet, I can go back in, I can dab some more in with like little dots. But I'm just trying to get this nice sort of red edge. Now you might think, why am I doing red on a pear that's gonna be green? Well, again, you guys just finished a complementary color mixing chart. So you know that if I wanna make a deeper green or sort of neutralize the green or brown it out a little bit of red is gonna do a lot of the work for me. Now I might see, okay, I've got this part, it didn't blend very well. So maybe I go in, I rinse my brush out, and maybe I get some new fresh clean water on my brush. I might need to kind of re-wet this area, and then eventually I can pull that down into the red, it's gonna keep spreading. Okay, so I've got kind of this highlight area and this red area, and now it's time to go in with my Hooker's Green. Now the Hooker's Green is pretty vivid, so I'm actually gonna go ahead and I'm gonna make an area out here. I'm grabbing a little bit of the paint, putting it out here. I'm actually going to add a hint of yellow ochre to that, just to calm that down a little bit. I can pick up some of my yellow ochre and I can mix that up out here. And if it gets a little too pale, then I add a little bit more Hooker's Green into it. It's starting to firm up already. There we go. So it's a nice value of that green. So now I can go over and I'm gonna go in now and start to fill in kind of all the areas around my highlights. I did my 2 highlights and I'm trying to sort of fill those areas in, and then all the white areas of my pear. I can bring this up a little bit and I can go kind of closer to the edge. I can even bring this into the edge a little bit. So bring this up around that edge. So I got that line a little bit. And now I'm gonna keep going and I'm gonna overlap my red. But you'll see what's happening is as I start to pull the green in and it goes over the red, they should start to mix a little bit and start to get kind of this sort of neutral, almost brown. I don't want to over mix it because I want to keep some of that subtle red hint or hue, but by going in there, I'm going to be really careful around my stem and pulling the paint around. It's going to kind of mix. It's going to create that darker value right there. Now, right now, my highlights are pretty abrupt. So I can rinse my brush out, get some clean water on there, and I'm gonna kind of touch the edge of my container so that it's really just a slightly damp brush. And I can go into my yellow and I can kind of like pull out and then clean my brush. I can pull some of the yellow like into the green a little bit. Kind of wash that out a touch. And make that a little less of an abrupt edge. But I am gonna let those colors kind of fade together a little bit. So as I go, you know, I kind of brought this in and now you can see it doesn't ever look like there's a harsh edge quite as much. I could go in, I might add a little bit more green in here. I might just dab a little bit in here if I need a little bit darker. And I might even do some of that texture. You know, if this got over blended, I might go in and just sort of do some of these little dots because they're gonna sort of keep my pear having that texture that I want. All right, that's actually all I need to do for now. And then I'm gonna let it go. I'm gonna let it sit. I'm gonna let it dry from this point on before I do any more to it. So now it's time to go to part 2. My pear is pretty dry. I did this earlier and you can see how things have settled. I've got this kind of speckling effect from where I dabbed it before. I got sort of, you can see how it bleeds together. I love that. And I want to add a tone, but it needs to be dry. But now I want to add a tone, almost a little bit of a splatter to show sort of the speckling you would get in your actual natural pear color. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get some of this deeper brown. This is called burnt umber, and burnt umber is the deepest brown I'm going to give you. I'm going to squeeze just a little bit out because I really need so little. I mean, I'm talking, that's a speck. So I'm going to take my burnt umber. That's all I need is over here in my palette, and I'm going to get ready to speckle this. Now, the first thing I need to do is I need to control where my splatter goes. So I've put out newsprint paper. Newsprint paper, ooh, I cannot get far enough away. Newsprint paper. I've put this out. It's just kind of, it's like what a newspaper is printed on. It's just this soft, ragged gray paper. But I've gone ahead and I've put this out. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my paper and and I'm going to fold it in half. And then I'm going to fold it in half again. So that now this area, if I were to unfold it, this would be the center. So I'm folding it and I'm keeping track of where the center is. And now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna kind of tear this sort of messy, irregular, chunky piece out of the corner. But if I open it up, now I've got this hole. And this hole is just about pear size. Now, if I went a little too big and I'm like, oh shoot, you know, I can do it again. I can get a different sheet of paper. I can do it again. But this will work for what I need it to do. But really, I don't want white showing. So I made my hole kind of big. That's okay. I can always just fold it over and protect this area. But I want an irregular edge. So that's the big thing. I don't want like the sharp edge. But now I folded that over. Basically, what I got is I just want to be able to control where my splatter goes. So now the splatter is only going to go where my opening is. So I've got that. I've got another tool in your brush kit should be this palette knife. And this palette knife is just a plastic little knife that most people use for acrylics, but we're gonna use it here today to help us with the splatter. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna take my brush, and for this, I would recommend actually a flat brush. So I'm gonna go ahead and get one of my flat brushes that have this sort of nice squared edge. I'm gonna get that wet. I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna mix a little bit of the burnt umber with it. And I want it to be not super watery, but I also don't want it to be thick paint. Again, with watercolor, there should always be some amount of water involved. Sometimes people want to paint with the straight paint on there. I'm like, that is not what this is for. So I got it a little watery. And now this is really easy, but I'm just gonna go ahead, I'm gonna take this, and I'm just gonna flick this on the side of my palette knife. And you can see I've got some of these speckles now. On my pear. And that looks kind of cool. Now I've got just a little bit. It's not too much, but I got some. I could also go in if I wanted some over here. Maybe I get a little bit more. And again, I can kind of control. I'm just doing. Oops. And of course, I didn't protect it very well, so I got a little bit off the edge. I'll account for that later. And you want to try not to do that. I'm trying to rush for the sake of time. Those aren't a big deal. So a few little specks, that just gives it a little bit more texture, a little bit more realism. So now that it's dry, we're gonna let that dry while we're waiting. However, the other thing I can do is, assuming I don't have a ton of speckles, is I can go ahead and I can work in my stem. So I'm gonna take a nice thin brush. I've got my number, well, this doesn't have a number on it. This is probably your thinnest brush, a nice fine point. I'll get a little bit of clean water, and I'm just gonna, just like I did before, wet on wet. I'm gonna do a wet on wet technique, and I'm gonna fill the stem in with clean water. And then I'm gonna get just a little bit of my yellow ochre. And with just the tip, a nice fine point, I can go ahead and I can do a nice kind of yellow ochre through most of it. And then I can go pick up a little bit more of this burnt umber. And I can do the inside of it, or the bottom side of my stem. And I'm just gonna let that be. Now those are gonna go ahead, they'll blend as they dry. But again, if I feel like I have too harsh of a line in between them, I can rinse my brush out so it's nice and clean. Dab it on a paper towel a little bit, and then I can just do kind of a clean brush across the middle, and that'll blend it a little bit more. But again, I do want it to be more light on one side, dark on the other. So I'm getting close. The last step, part 3, is the shadow, but we need everything to be dry before we can do that. So we're gonna stop here. Okay, we are in the home stretch. It's the final step of the pear. Everything is dry. And now all I need to do is I need to work on my shadow. So I've got my shadow sketched in. Again, like I've been doing now in every demo video, we're using that wet on wet technique. So again, I'm taking clear water. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna take that clear water and I'm gonna sort of fill in very carefully the shape of my shadow, where I want the shadow to go. And I can tell actually that my water is clean-ish, but it's got a little bit of color in it because of my oversplatter from before. I was rushing. You're gonna do better than that. So I'm going in and I am filling that in with a nice clean water. But actually, I don't mind that there's a hint of the brown in there because the two colors I'm gonna use for this are actually my ultramarine blue, I've got that over here, and burnt sienna. And burnt sienna is sort of a reddish brown color. But we know that if I take a little bit of blue, let me get some blue out here. I'll water that down a little bit, not too much. I'll take some blue, get a nice rich blue. And then if I mix its complement, now you might say, well, blue's complement is orange. And you're right, burnt sienna, you know, is basically a deep shade of orange. Some of these brown tones are really can be thought of as dark oranges. But I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna take that burnt sienna, I'm gonna take it out here and I'm gonna start to mix it together. And it's gonna start to make this really nice, deep, rich, almost black color, which is crazy when you start to think about it. In fact, I rarely use black paint because I think this is so much better. You can see how like that's a nice deep. And I'm gonna go ahead now, I'm gonna take that sort of deep black color and I'm just gonna start to paint it right against the top inside edge of where my shadow meets my pear. And I'm just gonna go ahead and pull that color along, right along that inside edge, all right? If I have any gaps or it's a little too light, I can go in, I can dab some back in. And now I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna get clean water on my brush. I'm gonna come and now I'm gonna pull a little bit of water to water this down a hint. And I can take now sort of a lighter version of it and I can just start to paint that in to the rest of my shadow. And then after I've painted that in all the way around, now I can go back through across the middle and those can meet. I'm gonna make sure that they're both wet so they're meeting. And if any of the dark black kind of escapes, I can sort of pull it back up. But I'm just gonna let that sit and those colors should spread together a little bit. But now I've got this shadow, and again, it has that sort of effect where a shadow has sort of the deep core part of the shadow, but then it kind of lightens as it goes out. It was not too difficult. And again, I can go in and I can always, you know, clean my edges up if I need to. If I want this to go right here, just a little bit more. But yeah, I'm pleased with that. So yeah, that is how we go ahead and we create like a nice shadow color, a nice gray. But again, I use that with blue and burnt sienna. I don't know if you could see that earlier when I was showing you. So ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. And then my pear is finished. And I've got a pretty nice three-dimensional looking pear with good tones.